September 11th, 2001, a date forever burned into the collective memory of our nation. We all remember where we were when those towers fell. We remember the firefighters rushing in as others rushed out. We remember the passengers of Flight 93. We remember the Pentagon. We remember the dust, the ash, the unimaginable loss. But today, I want to tell you about someone you probably don't remember. Someone whose name never made the evening news, whose face never graced the cover of Time magazine, whose story of extraordinary courage has been quietly fading into the shadows of history. This is the story of Remy Crowther, the man in the red bandana. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Welcome back to the forgotten past, where we uncover the stories that time tried to bury. Crowther was 24 years old on that September morning. Just 24. Think about that for a moment. In his short life, he had already accomplished more than many do in decades. He was an equities trader at Sandler O'Neill & Partners, working on the 104th floor of the South Tower of the World Trade Center. To his colleagues, he was the athletic guy with the easy smile, the one who always seemed to have his life together, the one with the bright future ahead of him. But Wells carried something with him every single day that most people never noticed: a red bandana. It was always in his pocket, always within reach. This wasn't just any piece of cloth. It was a gift from his father when he was just 6 years old. His father had taught him that a man always carries a handkerchief, that it's a simple but important tool. For Wells, that red bandana became more than a handkerchief. It became a part of who he was. He wore it when he played lacrosse. He kept it with him at work. It was his constant companion, though no one could have imagined just how significant that piece of red cloth would become. That Tuesday morning started like any other. Wells arrived at his desk, ready for another day of trading. The markets had just opened. Coffee was brewing. Phones were ringing. Life in New York City was moving at its usual frenetic pace. Then, at 8:46, everything changed. American Airlines Flight 11 struck the North Tower. For those in the South Tower, including Wells, there were 17 precious minutes before their building would be hit. 17 minutes of confusion, of conflicting announcements, of people trying to understand what was happening in the tower next door. At 9:03, United Airlines Flight 175 crashed into the South Tower, striking between floors 77 and 85. The impact was catastrophic. The building shuddered, walls crumbled, fires erupted, and up on the 104th floor, Crowther faced a choice. The same choice that everyone in those towers faced that day. A choice that would define the rest of their lives, however long or short that might be. Here's what we know happened next, pieced together from the testimony of survivors, from the investigation that followed, from the painful process of reconstructing those final hours. Wells could have run. He was in excellent physical condition, a former volunteer firefighter, an athlete. He knew the building. He could have made it down those stairs and out to safety. Some did. We don't judge those who fled. Survival is a powerful instinct. But Wells didn't run. Instead, he tied that red bandana around his nose and mouth and began heading down Wells. But not all the way down. Not to safety. He was going to the 78th floor, where the sky lobby was located, where the impact zone had created hell on Earth. Imagine descending into that chaos by choice. The smoke was so thick, you could barely see your hand in front of your face. The heat was intense. The smell of jet fuel and burning materials filled the air. People were screaming, crying, calling out for help. Some were critically injured. Others were paralyzed by fear and shock. Into this nightmare walked a young man with a red bandana covering his face, his voice calm and authoritative. "Follow me," he said. "I know the way out." A woman named Ling Young was on that 78th floor. She was badly burned, in shock, certain she was going to die. She remembers the young man in the red bandana appearing through the smoke like an apparition. He led her and a group of others to Stairway A, one of the few remaining viable escape routes. But he didn't stop there. He helped put out fires on people's clothing with his own hands. He found water to pour on their burns. He carried a woman on his back. He directed people down the stairs with the authority of someone trained for exactly this kind of emergency, which in fact he had been. What most people didn't know about Wells was that he had been a junior volunteer firefighter in his hometown of Upper Nyack, New York. Starting at age 16, he had trained with the Empire Hook and Ladder Company. He had learned search and rescue techniques. He had learned how to stay calm in crisis situations. He had learned that the fire service wasn't just a hobby, it was a calling. His father later recalled that Wells had told him, years before 9/11, that he wanted to leave finance and become a firefighter. He was planning to apply to the New York City Fire Department. He wanted to save lives. On that September morning, he got his chance. After guiding that first group to safety, after making sure they knew which way to go, Wells Crowther did something that separates heroes from the rest of us. He went back up. He went back into the smoke and fire. He went back to find more people who needed help. Survivors remember seeing him multiple times, always with that red bandana, always moving with purpose, always helping someone. Judy Wine, another survivor, was stuck on the 78th floor, unable to move, convinced she would die there. She remembers the man in the red bandana leading her and others to the stairs. She remembers his calm voice, his confidence, the way he seemed to know exactly what to do. He saved her life. She didn't know his name. None of them did. They only remembered the red bandana. The South Tower collapsed at 9:59, 56 minutes after being struck. It came down in 10 seconds. 110 stories reduced to rubble in the time it takes to read a paragraph. Wells Crowther's body was found 6 months later, in March of 2002. He was found alongside several firefighters from Ladder Company 118 in the lobby of the South Tower. Even in the final moments, he had been with the brothers he had always wanted to join. He never made it out, but because of him, at least 18 other people did. For months after 9/11, Wells's family knew he was gone, but they didn't know his story. They knew their son. They knew his character, his courage, his heart. But they didn't know what he had done that day. Then, in the spring of 2002, the New York Times published an article by James Stewart titled, "The Real Heroes Are Dead." The article mentioned survivors' accounts of a young man in a red bandana who had saved their lives. Wells's mother, Allison, read that article, and something clicked. The red bandana. Her son always carried a red bandana. She reached out to the survivors mentioned in the article. They met, they shared their stories, and slowly, piece by piece, the truth emerged. The unknown hero in the red bandana was Wells' Remy Crowther. The young man who had saved their lives was her son. Can you imagine that moment? The grief of loss, mixed with the overwhelming pride of knowing what your child did in his final hour. Knowing that he could have saved himself, but chose instead to save others. The Crowther family had always known Wells was special, but now the world was beginning to understand it too. Ling Young, the woman who had been so badly burned, who had been certain she would die on that 78th floor, later said that thinking about Wells and what he did for her kept her going through months of painful recovery. She said he gave her a second chance at life. Judy Wine echoed those sentiments, so did others. They had children they got to watch grow up. They had grandchildren they got to meet. They had years of life they never would have experienced, if not for a 24-year-old they never even knew by name. But here's what makes this story even more profound. Wells Crowther wasn't a trained emergency responder on duty that day. He wasn't a firefighter or a police officer or a paramedic. He was a civilian. He was an equities trader in a suit and tie. He had no obligation to do what he did. Society didn't expect it of him. No one would have blamed him for saving himself. Yet when the moment came, when the choice presented itself, he didn't hesitate. All that training as a junior firefighter, all those hours volunteering, It wasn't just something he did, it was who he was. And when the world needed him most, he became exactly what he had always prepared to be. The story of Wells Crowther raises uncomfortable questions for all of us. What would we have done? If we were in that building, in that moment, with that choice, what would we choose? It's easy to say we'd be heroes when we're safe at home, removed from danger. It's much harder when the smoke is real, when the heat is burning your lungs, when every instinct is screaming at you to run. Wells chose differently. He chose service over self-preservation. He chose others over his own tomorrow. In the years since 9/11, the Crowther family has worked tirelessly to keep Wells's memory alive and to honor his legacy of service. They established the Remy Crowther Charitable Trust, which supports young people pursuing careers in emergency services and community service. They speak at schools, at fire departments, at memorial services. They share Wells's story not for glory, but because they believe his example can inspire others to live lives of purpose and service. Boston College, Wells's alma mater, honored him by retiring his lacrosse jersey number 19. They created the Wells Crowther Red Bandana Run, an annual race that raises money for the scholarship fund established in his name. Participants wear red bandanas, carrying forward the symbol that has come to represent courage, sacrifice, and selflessness. In 2006, Wells was posthumously named an honorary New York City firefighter. The dream he never got to fulfill in life was recognized in death. His family was presented with his fire helmet at a ceremony that brought together survivors, firefighters, and family members. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Here was a young man who had wanted nothing more than to serve, and in his final hour, he became the embodiment of everything the fire service represents. The National September 11th Memorial and Museum features Wells's story prominently. His red bandana is there, preserved behind glass, a simple piece of cloth that has become a powerful symbol of heroism. Visitors from around the world stop to read about the man in the red bandana. They learn his name. They learn his story. They're reminded that heroes aren't always the people we expect. Sometimes they're 24-year-old traders with their whole lives ahead of them who choose to give it all away so others might live. But here's what troubles me, and why this story belongs on the forgotten past. Despite all of this, despite the memorials and the scholarships and the ceremonies, most Americans still don't know Wells Crowther's name. We remember 9/11. We remember the firefighters, and we should. We remember the passengers who fought back on Flight 93, and we must. But somehow, stories like Wells's slip through the cracks. They fade. They become footnotes. And that's not right. This young man saved at least 18 lives that we know of. 18 families that got to keep their loved ones because of his courage. 18 people who have gone on to live full lives, to love and be loved, to contribute to their communities, to raise families. The ripple effect of his actions on that one day extends forward through time in ways we can never fully calculate. How many grandchildren exist today because Wells Crowther went back up those stairs? How many lives have been touched by the people he saved? And yet, when we think of 9/11 heroes, his name doesn't immediately come to mind for most people. That needs to change. Not because the Crowther family seeks recognition. They don't. But because his story carries a message that every generation needs to hear. That ordinary people can do extraordinary things. That character is revealed in crisis. That how we've lived our entire life prepares us for the moments that truly matter. Wells didn't become a hero on September 11th, 2001. He already was one. That day simply revealed what had been true about him all along. The service, the training, the values instilled by his parents, the commitment to putting others first. These weren't things he summoned in an emergency. They were the foundation of who he already was. His father remembers Wells coming home from his junior firefighting training, talking excitedly about what he'd learned. His mother remembers him always helping classmates, always standing up for kids who were being bullied, always gravitating towards service. His friends remember him as loyal, dependable, the guy you wanted on your team. His colleagues remember his work ethic, his integrity, his character. All of these memories paint a picture of someone who was preparing, perhaps without even knowing it, for his defining moment. There's a powerful lesson in that for all of us, especially in the world we live in today. We spend so much time focused on success, on achievement, on accumulation. We measure our lives by job titles and bank accounts and social media followers. But when everything stripped away on that September morning, when life came down to its most essential elements, none of that mattered. What mattered was character. What mattered was courage. What mattered was whether you were the kind of person who ran toward danger to help others or away from it to save yourself. Wells had been building that character his entire life, one small choice at a time, until the moment came when it all mattered. 24 years old. Think about what you were doing at 24. Think about what you cared about, what you prioritized, what you thought was important. Wells Crowther, at 24, saved 18 lives and gave his own in the process. He became immortal in the best possible way, through the lives he touched, through the example he set, through the legacy he left behind. The survivors who owe their lives to him have never forgotten. They speak his name. They tell his story. They make sure their children and grandchildren know about the man in the red bandana. Every year on September 11th, they remember not just the tragedy of that day, but the miracle that a stranger with a red bandana appeared through the smoke and gave them a future. Ling Young, who was so severely burned that day, who lost colleagues and friends, says she thinks about Wells every single day. Every single day. She says he's part of her family now, even though they never had a real conversation, even though she never knew his name, until months after he saved her life. That's the power of sacrifice. That's the bond created when someone gives everything so you can have something. As we approach another anniversary of September 11th, as the years continue to pass and the memory of that day becomes history for a new generation that wasn't alive to experience it, stories like Wells Crowther's become even more important. We can't let them fade. We can't let them be forgotten, because they remind us of what's best in humanity. They remind us that even in our darkest hours there is light. Even when evil seems overwhelming, there is good. Even when we feel hopeless, there are heroes. Wells Remy Crowther was one of 2,977 people who died on September 11th. Each one was a unique individual, a beloved family member, a friend, a colleague. Each one left a hole that can never be filled. But Wells's story, the story of the man in the red bandana, gives us something to hold on to. It shows us that death, as final as it is, doesn't get the last word. Love does. Service does. Sacrifice does. Somewhere today, a firefighter is wearing a red bandana under their helmet in honor of Wells. Somewhere today, a college student at Boston College is studying on a scholarship that bears his name. Somewhere today, a survivor he rescued is hugging their grandchild, living a life they never would have had without his courage. And somewhere today, a young person is hearing this story for the first time and making a quiet decision to live differently, to serve more, to be the kind of person who runs toward people who need help instead of away from them. That's Wells Crowther's real legacy. Not just the 18 people he saved that day, as monumental as that is, but everyone who has heard his story and been inspired to be better, to do more, to live with purpose. That legacy grows every time someone chooses service over selfishness, every time someone helps a stranger, every time someone does the right thing, even when it's hard. So today, on the forgotten past, we remember. We remember Wells Remy Crowther. We remember the man in the red bandana. We remember that heroes walk among us, often unrecognized, until the moment arrives when their true character is revealed. We remember that age is no barrier to greatness, that 24 years can be enough to live a life that matters. We remember that ordinary people can do extraordinary things, and we commit to keeping his story alive, to sharing it, to making sure that future generations know his name and understand what he did and why it matters. Because in remembering him, we honor not just his sacrifice, but the sacrifice of all who gave their lives that day. In telling his story, we push back against the forgetting that time inevitably brings. In keeping his memory alive, we ensure that his final acts of courage continue to inspire long after that terrible September morning. Wells Remy Crowther, the unknown hero of 9/11, the man in the red bandana, gone, but never forgotten, not by the people he saved, not by his family who loves him still, not by those of us who believe that heroes deserve to be remembered, and not by you, now that you know his name and his story. Thank you for watching The Forgotten Past. If this story moved you, please share it. Tell someone about Wells Crowther. Keep his memory alive. And remember, the heroes we need don't always wear capes. Sometimes they just carry a red bandana and a heart full of courage.